on the last episode of the Keepsake box. That was the day that solidified my security with David. Security was something that I'd always searched for. I realized that I was comfortable allowing David to handle things without me having to worry or check behind him. I knew that things would always be handled the right way, and that was attractive to me. Now don't get me wrong, I haven't ever disregarded what the other men offered to my situation, but it was different. I knew that I could depend on Ken in some areas, and I could depend on Antonio in some others, but David was an entire security package. Ken was one of those by any means necessary types. He would hustle here and there, and it would always be just enough. And if anything needed to be handled, Ken didn't have a problem letting his hands do the talking. That's who he was. But he was young and impulsive. If things had progressed between us, I would always have had to check behind him. I would always be worried that he would place us in the wrong situation. I couldn't ever have felt comfortable letting him completely handle things. He wasn't set up that way. Antonio was more reliable. He was older and he had more experience. I felt comfortable allowing Antonio to make decisions, and I was always pleased with the outcome. He took care of the things that mattered, and he provided amazing experiences for where I was at that point in my life. Antonio wasn't one to get his hands dirty. He let his goons take care of things, but that was problematic as well. The goons were only of service because Antonio lived an alternative lifestyle. Everything was based on that. After maturing for a while, I realized that the life shouldn't ever have been a life plan, but it was for Antonio. And without the life, the lifestyle goes away. I couldn't ever have depended on Antonio to trade in the life for a comfortable and secure existence. He wasn't set up that way. But David was different. His respect spoke for him. And the years that I had known David, no one had ever crossed him. Sure, he used some less than honorable means to get his way sometimes, but he managed to accomplish things without using violence, and I fell under his umbrella. People respected me because of him, and I loved that. Additionally, David was able to offer a level of financial security that I couldn't ever have even dreamt of having with the other two. And at the time, I felt that his security was free and clear. I felt that David was set up to offer everything that I wanted and needed. Chapter 11, This Means Forever. Narrated by Shandora Warren. Music by Epidemic Sound. After a few hours, we arrived at our destination. David escorted me off the plane. It was beautiful and tropical. It was warm, but not humid. It was Belize. Though on land, the gentle breeze carried a scent of water into my nostrils. Belize felt like everything that could possibly be right in the world. It was amazing. Immediately after exiting the plane, we were greeted by an attractive young lady. She introduced herself as Juanita and told us that she would be taking care of us for the week. We boarded a boat that transported us to another island. It was lush with greenery and exotic local fruits. Afterwards, we boarded a golf court, which took us to a casita on the far end of the island. Though slightly rustic on the outside, the casita was beautifully furnished. All of the wood appeared to be indigenous. It was small but very well put together. The front door opened to a joint kitchen, living, and dining area. A bathroom was located to our immediate right. There was a short flight of stairs that led to a bedroom loft area and a separate bathroom. It was basically one large room. To my surprise, our luggage was already in the bedroom. That's the thing about David. He always plans everything down to the simplest of details. That was a simultaneous blessing and curse. David exercised an extreme amount of forethought. That same attribute would prove to be a tool of his manipulation, but that's a different story. Juanita told us that she would be residing in a casita next door if she was needed. David tipped her and made her exit. I told David that he had certainly outdone himself. He smiled and told me that there was so much more to see. David and I took showers and prepared to see the sights. I looked inside of my suitcase. It was obvious that David expected me to be scantily clad for the duration of our stay. I removed one of the items. "Try it on," said David. I slipped on the top, which was little more than nipple coverage. The bottom was much of the same. I inquisitively looked at David. He read my mind and replied, "When in Rome." Just so you understand my perplexity, you need to know something about David. He was very image conscious and placed a lot of value in modesty. None of my David-approved clothing exposed too much. David always made sure that we presented ourselves in the best possible manner. We always looked and dressed the part. If we were angry, we paused those feelings until we were out of the public eye. That's who we were. David wouldn't have accepted anything less. So imagine my surprise at the realization that he wanted me to go out into the world nearly nude. David, still wearing a towel, stood behind me. He turned me around to face the mirror. He addressed me in his usual tone. It was authoritative, yet calm and reassuring. He said, "Look at yourself, Shelley. You're beautiful. We are beautiful. Next week, we can go home and be lawyers and accountants. But this week we are in Belize. We are amidst the beautiful people. Let's do as the beautiful people do." David retrieved a pair of shorts from his suitcase. He then retrieved an item from my suitcase and passed it to me. "Maybe this will make you more comfortable," he said. It was a covering. Although it was netted and basically sheer, the covering made me feel less exposed. David passed me a pair of flip-flops and I watched him put on his shorts. For the first time, I experienced an immense sexual attraction towards him. David was of average height with olive skin. He had curly brown hair that had little speckles of blonde that danced in the light. His face was structured perfectly, and his body, I'll just say that his grueling gym schedule wasn't at all in vain. I hadn't seen any of that in David prior to that point in time. He was stern, deliberate, and calculating, but on that day, I saw him as sexy for the very first time. David and I spent hours taking in all that was Belize. He was correct in his assessment. We weren't at all underdressed. He was also correct in his assertion that we would be amongst the beautiful people. I hadn't seen that many underdressed bodies since my days of frequenting Antonio's strip club, but those bodies were different. The girls at Antonio's club were homegrown, the results of decent genes, greens, and the occasional liposuction. But the women in Belize were pristine. Everything from their hair to their toes was in place. There were no dents and droops. They proudly displayed their bodies like fine works of art. For the first time, I understood David's intense push for me to look my best. David didn't just want us to fit in with the beautiful people. He wanted us to be the beautiful people, and we were. Juanita showed us around, and we were afforded the opportunity to experience the most beautiful exhibitions of neighborhood. It was only day one, and I couldn't imagine how the rest of the week could possibly surpass that day. Yet David found a way to do so. While David and I had been sampling the local cuisine throughout the day, we hadn't sat down to actually enjoy a meal. David inquired about a nice restaurant that catered to the elite and was a little less busy. Juanita told him that she had the perfect place. David and I showered and made our way to the restaurant suggested by Juanita. It certainly didn't disappoint. It was exquisite, yet quaint. The staff was catering and personable, and the food was like nothing else that I had ever experienced. It was an amazing day, but my battery was dying. I was exhausted and in desperate need of rest. I expressed my sentiments to David, who completely understood. He replied, "Of course we can leave, sweetheart, but there's one thing I have to do first." David walked around and got down onto one knee. He took my hand and looked into my eyes. He said, "Shelley, you are everything that I've ever wanted in a woman, and I would be doing myself a disservice if I didn't seize this opportunity. There isn't anyone in this world that I would rather have by my side until the day that I die. Will you marry me?" I was genuinely shocked, but ecstatic. I was fully aware that David was the marrying type, but I didn't expect a proposal at that time. The private plane and trip were both over the top. A proposal wasn't even on my radar. No wonder David insisted that the surprise would be the best one yet. As usual, he managed to make everything bigger and better. I jumped up from my chair and hugged David. "Of course I'll marry you," I said. I was crying and jumping up and down. I was so excited that I hadn't taken the opportunity to view the ring. But when I did, the proposal became even more perfect. While not the most expensive piece that David had purchased for me, I immediately understood the relevance. It was a beautiful platinum ring with chocolate and white diamonds. David never missed the opportunity to make references to our interracial relationship. That was his way of officially merging us together. It was perfect. David slid the ring onto my finger and looked into my eyes. He said, "This means forever, Shelley. Me, you, and Cassidy." I attempted to kiss David, but he stopped me. He again repeated his statement. "This means forever, Shelley. You understand that, right?" I put my arm around David's neck and looked into his eyes. I answered, "Yes, I understand this means forever." Once again, I tried to kiss David, and once again, he stopped me. "Promise me that you'll be by my side to the day that I die." I answered in the same manner as before. "David, I understand this means forever, and I'll be by your side until the day that you die. I promise." David smiled and told me that I had made his life complete. I was ecstatic. I found it hard to understand how I had gotten so lucky. We returned to our casita and enjoyed a night of passionate lovemaking. What a wonderful end to our anniversary. And that was just day one. Day two was much the same. We saw the sights and we sampled the food. David and I spent the day half nude in the company of the beautiful people. We spent very little time in the casita, and I understood why David hadn't insisted on better accommodations. It was rather pointless. Day one was a day of surprises. Day two would hold some as well. Instead of going out to dinner, David suggested that we stay in. I wasn't surprised by his request. David was a man of means. I was certain that he had worked out the details. I was also certain that they would be worth staying in for. We showered and prepared for dinner. I was looking forward to spending a romantic night alone with David. David, however, had other plans. Juanita arrived and prepared a wonderful spread of local favorites. Everything was delicious. We relocated to the couch. Juanita sat with us and we discussed the details of our lives. I told her the story of David and Shelley, omitting Shelonda and Star. Those parts of my life were off limits. We finished dinner and Juanita gathered the dishes to wash them. David turned to face me. His mannerisms informed me that we were about to have a serious conversation. He exhibited the facial expression that he usually had when he was about to address my tardiness. "Do you trust me?" he asked. Without taking the time to think, I answered, "Of course I do." David continued, "I want to share all of my experiences with you. Can we experience something together, sweetheart?" I looked at David, searching for some indication of what I should be considering. I didn't have to wonder long. David kissed me. Again he asked, "Do you trust me, sweetheart?" Between kisses, I whispered, "Yes, I trust you." David retrieved a small bag and presented me with a pill. "What's this?" I asked. Between kisses, he said, "Trust me, sweetheart." I opened my mouth and David placed a pill on the tip of my tongue. I swallowed it. David ingested a pill as well. The effects of the pill were nearly instantaneous. I immediately started to feel warm and tingly. David began to unzip the back of my dress. "Let me help you out of that," he said. I was obviously altered. Even so, I was very much aware that Juanita was in the kitchen, mere steps away. "What are you doing?" I asked. David whispered in my ear, "Shh, sweetheart, enjoy the ride." David kissed my neck as he unzipped my dress. I was incredibly aroused, more so than I could ever remember being by him. I closed my eyes, completely losing the ability to become cognizant of my surroundings. I heard David's voice. "Juanita, would you like to join us?" No part of me was bothered by David's request, and that surprised me. The thought of being in an intimate situation with a woman hadn't ever crossed my mind, but that night I was all for it. Juanita walked over and began to kiss me. I returned her kiss. David told her to remove her clothes. She did as she was told. Juanita's body was amazing. She had full breasts, a small waist, and a voluptuous rear end. She was the epitome of the Coke bottle shape. I was very much attracted to her. She seemed to be attracted to us as well. As usual, David took control and gave us step-by-step instructions. I knew after that first time that I would sleep with Juanita again. Actually, I would sleep with her 4 more times before we left Belize. At the end of the week, I was dreading our return home. We said our goodbyes to Juanita and told her that we would see her again. And that was our first trip to Belize. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow Shinny Tells a Story on Facebook and Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. If you like to purchase books by Shandora Warren, they're all available on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and some in hardback formats. Thank you for helping me to create the world that I want to see. Oh yeah, you're welcome.